want you to just tell me your story. How did art become your passion? Take us way back. How old were you?
Um, so I got started with art. It was just, I don't even think it was planned. Me getting started with art. I just knew, from as far back as that I could remember being a little kid. I had to. My mom was big on education, so after I was born, that was the piece of advice the doctor gave her. Just like make sure he gets the best education you can provide. And so when it came time for me to start school, um, that was the thing. She wanted me to attend normal classes. She knew I was going to college, and just at home, even prior to me starting school, being able to read and stuff like that. We did all those things at home, but the hurdle I had before I could actually start school and attend like classes, like I guess if you want to call them regular classes, was being able to write. And so between my mom and my grandma, they came up with the idea for using coloring books. So I was also a patient at Scottish Rite. So we checked out some videos from the hospital, um, and there were other patients in those videos, and I just got a chance to see how they figured out how to do things. And there is one girl, her name is Peaches, and I remember her watching her video. She's an artist. She would sculpt and draw and stuff like that. She was born without her arms, and she would do it with her feet. And so we watched those videos, and then we were still trying to solve that problem of me being able to write. And my grandma really kind of led the way. She came up with this idea of using coloring books, and so we just tried a bunch of different things. So long story short, I learned how to write. I was able to start school, and I started school when I was like 3 years old. My mom found some program that allowed me to start early. Um, but I figured out how to write, and my grandma kept buying the coloring books. And so eventually I wanted to learn how to draw the pictures in the coloring books. So I started tracing them. But I guess the thing that really got me into art that was driving me while I was doing this was the fact that, just like any kid, I would watch cartoons and I didn't see any of the characters that looked like me.
Mm.
And so I was like, okay, well, if there are no heroes in these shows or comic books or anything that are born like me, then I want to create those characters. I want to be able to tell those stories. And so I had to learn how to draw, and that's where I got the tracing and the coloring books that my grandma would buy for me. And then when I was about 5 or 6, I was just sitting at home watching TV, and I drew one of the cartoon characters off the TV while I was watching TV. And I showed my grandma, and she was like, "You traced that?" And I was like, "No." So it just kind of turned into a thing. She would give me stuff to draw around the house. Um, but I think early on, I was interested in animation, and I just wanted to figure out how to, be able to make characters and tell stories about people like me. And I feel like looking back at it retrospectively, the closest thing I probably had as a kid to, being able to see myself reflected in that sort of medium was the X-Men. Because you had Nightcrawler, and the way his hands and feet are, that's actually another condition I found out later on. That one is more so genetic, I believe, but there are people born like that. But just the whole concept of the X-Men and the way people reacted to them in society and things like that was as close as I had. So I wanted to just learn how to create my own character so I could tell that story or tell my story. And that's just kind of what got me into art, learning how to draw. And then from there, it went beyond cartoons. I got into other things, as I got older. The rest is, I guess, kind of like history at this point.
Now, how did your peers respond? Because they say kids can be cruel,
Mm-hmm.
right? So when you first entered into grade school,
Mm-hmm.
how did they respond to you? And then would you say that your artwork kind of helped earn your respect?
So I would say I remember my earliest friend, guy I used to hang out with, he was in a wheelchair. Um, and we used to talk about stuff a lot. But there was always that initial I guess, hurdle that I would have to overcome when I would enter like a new space. And my mom was really good about preparing me for it. Because earlier on I was really shy about the way I was born. So I would try to hide my hands, or I would try to like do stuff really quick so people couldn't, see my hands. And then you do have people that talk about you and, say things about you. But I just learned earlier on to really focus on doing the things that I love to do and just really just being a kid. And so I would always have to overcome that hurdle. But I do think once I really got more into my art, a lot of times, um, when I would run into those things, as I got older, it's a new grade, a new class, or whatever. Um, you see this kid with no hands, but it's like, oh my God, he can draw. Like, how do you do that? And
To earn their respect.
yeah, and it just kind of turned into a thing that would start the conversation. And then also too, instead of getting upset about it when people would stare and point and whisper and things like that, my mom taught me earlier on, just let them ask. Either let them ask or smile and wave at them, make it as awkward as possible, so you get it out the way or whatever. And I think as I got older, I started to develop, you get more clever about things or whatever. And just being comfortable with it. And the thing that really got me, I was trying out for soccer when I was about 6 or 7. And I was trying to try out for the team with my hands in my pockets. And I couldn't run as fast as I normally would because I wasn't, using my arms. So I'm sitting up here in soccer tryouts because I'm worried about what the other kids are going to say. And she just kind of pulled me to the side. She's like, you got to stop doing that because you're holding yourself back.
Mm.
And so I think that was a pivotal moment for me in childhood that just really kind of, you know what, I am the way that I am. Some people are going to be taken aback by it, but I create space for them to, if they want to ask questions, they will. If not, I'm still going to be myself. And I think through doing that, your personality, and this is not even just for me, I think this is in general, your personality overshines, my appearance or the way that I was born or the fact that I didn't have hands.
Now, you said your mom helped prepare you.
Mm-hmm.
How did she help prepare you?
So how did my mom help prepare me? Man, too many ways. I think earlier on she would always go like the first day of school, and that was more so for her to observe the teachers because she didn't want them treating me any different. Because she knew how things worked at home. He can wash dishes, he can fold clothes, he can don't cut them any slack, And so there was that preparation. There was always a conversation with the teachers until I got to about middle school, and I was like, you don't have to do all of that. Because you get cool around middle school and the whole popularity thing. But she would always do that in elementary, and then too, there were conversations that her and I would have, like just one-on-one, where we would actually, she would ask me like, "What are you struggling with? What do you need help with?" And it was more so like us talking through solving those problems constantly. And so anytime I got ready for a new environment or to try something new, it was like, okay, let's try it at home. And I had prosthetics when I was younger. She would take them away because she's like, what if you're somewhere and you don't have your assistive devices? How are you going to button your shirt? How are you going to, eat your food? How are you going to do certain things or whatever? And so she would challenge me at home because there was always, and I tell people this all the time, I think now people see me and they're like, oh, he, does most things fine. But when I was a kid, there was a lot of like behind the scenes, okay, what if I'm not here? What if your grandma's not here? What if you're somewhere by yourself? You got to figure these things out. And we were constantly working through those things. So when I would go into situations like the classroom, I was always prepared.
That kind of reminds me of Ray Charles' story. His mom.
Mm-hmm.
His mom kind of had that same mentality raising him.
Yeah.
Which was it was tough love.
Yeah.
Because they know the world is tough.
Yeah.
So obviously it paid off. That's great.
Yeah.
So now we talk a little bit about your faith. What did your faith, know you're a Christian.
Mm-hmm.
How did that play a part in building that inner strength?
God was always first. And I think, the church I grew up in, um, my mom, she had a real strong faith. And I think that was the other element of it that really just kind of kept kept us where we needed to be, as I was working through challenges and things like that. And so I think about it in my adult life, like as a parent, like what are the things she was up praying about at night and she was worried about? Because I could only imagine. And she always would remind me or lead with the fact that, God does not make mistakes. He puts people here for a reason and he'll make a way for them. He's going to make a way for us. And no matter the situation we were ever in, she was adamant about that, even until she passed away. She had a battle with ALS, and towards the end, she was losing her mobility and her ability to raise her arms. Got harder for her to breathe, but she still had a smile on her face. Even the last few moments, I spent with her. She told me she liked my hair, and then she was just like, "You'll be all right," and she smiled and gave me a thumbs up. But I look at that
Praise God.
as like her. She just had this unwavering faith growing up, and I watched her. There were times you don't think kids are paying attention, but it's like I knew she was sitting at the dinner table trying to figure something out or figure out how, you know, she was going to get me in some kind of program, or because she was real big on the education thing. So finding little supplemental programs and things for me to do outside the classroom, she was adamant about that. And so I knew she was like figuring out, how am I going to pay for this? How is this going to work out? And, just watching her having that faith, it was just like, well, we'll go for it. And I trust that God is going to make a way. And sure enough, that's what always happened. And I remember the summer arts program at the South Dallas Culture Center. I don't know how she found that program, um, but she took me up there, and I don't know if you had to sign up for it, or register for it, or something like. But I don't know how I got connected with that. But she found that program, and it's just like, that opened uh, a whole new world for me in terms of being able to explore other forms of creativity, not just drawing or whatever, which is what I was doing when I was younger, but learning how to paint, learning how to write, theater, create music, and all of that centered around African American history. Um, and so she, yeah, I don't know how she found Miss Vickie.
It tells about Miss Vickie, because it's Vickie Meeks, right?
Yeah.
And you called her. I mentioned her name to you. You said, "Oh, Mama Meeks."
Yeah, no, we call her Mama Vickie. And just as a kid, it's like she had all these kids from like South Dallas. I was from Pleasant Grove. Uh, but I mean, the rest of my family was from South Dallas area. But she had all these kids in the hood, basically. But even far back, as far as I can remember, being as young as I was, she was just one of those adults that she commanded attention because you knew she wasn't coming to play, but it was in a loving way. She wanted to pull out the best in us. She wanted to teach us, which she did in the staff in her program. They were always good about putting together a curriculum for us to really learn about not only African American history, but some of the history in Dallas, in the city and state of Texas, and things like that. Um, but then giving us avenues and pushing us to really explore different art forms. So I get there and I'm like, oh, I just want to draw. And she's like, no, you have creative writing. You need to learn how to write poetry. You need to learn how to be expressive. Okay, I'm writing, but why am I taking theater? Because that's another form of expression. And all of these things have an aesthetic and they can feed into what you're doing or whatever your specialty may be. If you want to draw, if you want to paint, or if you want to do photography, having at least some experience with those other things gives you more of a view of what it is you're trying to focus on. I think the South Dallas Cultural Center was an important program for me, and I think that program is important for kids because it connects us with other kids in that neighborhood, in that community. Um, So we became like this little cohort, and it gave us somewhere to go over the summers for me. I mean, there was a program that went on during the school year, but I only went during the summer. But it gave me somewhere to go to where I would look forward to seeing my friends and then also learning something new about African American history, about African American history in the city of Dallas, and then also tying that history into us exploring different art forms. So teaching us how to understand the history and apply it and be expressive. And then, all of that kind of culminates into us being able to grow up and think about where we want to go, like how we're going to move the needle forward coming from, South Dallas. So like for me, coming from Pleasant Grove, like just because I'm from there, that doesn't mean I need to limit myself to where I can go in life. And I think that program was one of those places that was pivotal, along with Miss Vickie. She's still one of my mentors to this day. And the instructors we had there, they would always push us to understand that the world was bigger than where we were. And so I think that's why that program is so important.
Now, what was that first, I'd say, artwork? That first drawing or painting that you knew you had this gift.
So I started painting probably when I was in middle school, so about seventh grade. And really, it was just I had spent a couple summers at the cultural center, and so we got into like figure drawing with charcoal and things like that. Mr. Gillespie, who I work with now, he's still kind of like a mentor. He and his wife Valerie have been kind of helping me with my art career now. But he was one of my earliest instructors, so he taught us a lot about figure drawing, using charcoal and things like that. Um, and then he would take us to paint murals. And then when I got to middle school, uh, Bob Ross would be on TV because it's like during the school year I wouldn't have the program, so I found Bob Ross. I would rip the cardboard flaps off of the boxes in the garage and turn my mom's dinner chairs into easels. And really just, she got me like an acrylic starter set, and she's like, I know this will keep you busy. And that's where I started. And I think after about two or three of those earlier ones, I really got into it. Like, I want to learn how to paint too. So that was at my earliest, but then I stopped after high school and I picked up I had my first oil painting class my junior year of college. And, it's different from acrylics because acrylics, I liked it, but I always felt like I had to finish the painting like in 10 minutes. Well, with oils, I could think my way through the paintings because they don't dry fast. And so the first painting I really did that I felt like, okay, I really like this, is my largest painting. It was a painting of Aaliyah.
Mm.
Um, and it was the largest painting I had done up until that point. And it wasn't necessarily the drawing of her, but it was the mixing of the colors, which was something I never would have thought about required so much attention to detail. But there were colors in that painting. I spent like 20 or 30 minutes just mixing the paint to get it the color I wanted. So my mom took that painting and she actually entered it into a City of Dallas art competition. And I didn't sign the front of it because this was the first painting. I was like, okay, this is it. I don't want to touch it. It was done. I was like, I don't want to do anything else to it. And so she was so worried about somebody stealing that painting that she wrote my name in pen down the side. And I ended up getting third. That was the only time I was mad at her. I ended up getting third place. And I was like, that's because you wrote my name on the painting.
Now, how old were you at that time?
Junior, I was probably like 19, 18, 19.
So I guess that right there boosted your self-esteem. So I'm sure you got some really good feedback. Third place, great. So from there,
I wanted first.
you were the first place.
Yeah.
So wait, I guess that inspired you to just persevere and to get a first place.
Yeah, like it was even to be able for that to be my first real like oil painting, I mean, just to even place in a competition like that, I think that's what really kind of I'm like, okay, this is a thing. And then, like I said, just working with oils, it was a totally different medium, so I could treat my paintings um, not only as this expressive means to create something, but I could work through them like a puzzle. And that just kind of goes back to everything else in the way I've lived my life, always solving problems. And so I learned how to be strategic, and I mean, you're always working on getting better, finding ways to get better. But each painting is, to me, is kind of like a puzzle, and I try to find ways to be strategic about my approach to it, and then how to improve upon that. And the oils, they just give me the freedom to really take my time.
Mm. So after that contest, did you go on to compete in more contests?
After that competition, I think I did like a couple more while I was in college, but then I got really into computer graphics and animation. And so I started doing more of that. And then I was looking for a job or my first professional job after I finished my graduate program. Um, and at the same time, I was working on like this 3D model. And
Now, where did you go to school at?
I went to the University of Texas at Dallas. And so UT's little nerdy cousin, or as my friend that still works there, he likes to call it the MIT of the South.
Okay.
Yeah. But no, I was working on this thing on my computer, this 3D model. I spent like 60 plus hours working on it. And then my computer crashes, like the power blipped in my apartment or something like that, and it corrupted my file. Mm-hmm. And like that night, I was like, you know what? I'm gonna paint. Mm-hmm. Granted, you don't have the undo buttons or anything like that, but that's when I realized the stuff on the computer, I still love it and doing digital stuff. And it was a different way of approaching creativity, but it was just something in that moment. I'm like, if I was drawing this or if I was painting this, it's all muscle memory. I can paint over it. It's almost like being an athlete. And it just reminded me that how much I missed it. And so I just kind of got into it because also too, I'm like, I was thinking about job interviews, and I go on these job interviews and spend 45 minutes talking to somebody, and they would ask me if I could use a keyboard and mouse. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, okay, I'm gonna paint one for me, but then I'm gonna record myself painting so I can show this to people so they can see if he can do this, then I'm pretty sure he can use a computer.
Gotcha. Yeah. Now, where does your inspiration come from for your paintings?
Early as I can remember, my earlier inspiration, again, just kind of came from that space of wanting to see myself reflected in media or see characters like me reflected in media. But then, too, now I guess where I'm at, it really with getting back into painting, I always loved character drawing and character animation and design. And so through painting, it's like I meet people and I learn about their stories. And I've always been of the mindset, it doesn't matter what your background is, there's something you can learn from everybody's human experience. It's like us living on this planet is like giving a bunch of kids a camera and putting them in the same room. No two kids are going to take the same two pictures.
True.
And so just my mindset about painting now is more about trying to capture a story, emotion, and in the way that I use my brushes, I try to keep some of the gestural stuff I learned from drawing with animation or drawing for animation in my paintings. But the goal is to really just try to evoke some sort of emotion from the viewer and bring them into the subject and let them create the story around it.
Now, what is a typical day for you like?
Now?
Now.
Typical day for me now, I'm up at 5:45. I have two kids, so got to get them to school. After I get them to school, in addition to art, I'm a project manager. I've been a project manager now for about 13 years. 9 years working at Scottish Rite Hospital, 3 years at UTD.
What do you do as a project manager?
No, that's 12 years. As a project manager, I manage healthcare infrastructure, IT infrastructure projects. And so that's the stuff behind the walls, stuff that goes on the computers and stuff that are used in different areas. I work with our facilities team to build out new areas. So the Scottish Rite campus at in Frisco, that was to me, one of my hugest accomplishments, because for being a patient, being able to work on a facility like that and make sure the technology that the providers use is delivered so they can treat patients. Uh, that's one of my personal greatest accomplishments today. But I do that in addition. So I work as a project manager. I get my kids. We got our activities, um, and then I finish up my work day, go do something with them, and then at nighttime I run, and then I go paint.
Are they good? Are your kids good artists?
Uh, I think my son has more of that like natural raw ability to compose things. My daughter is more meticulous.
Mm-hmm.
And so just even with creativity, I have supplies for them, but I don't push it on them. I let them ask questions. And if they're curious about it, hey, just grab something and hop in, and we'll do it together. I've given them little projects to do and things like that. And so just kind of make it fun. And, if one of them gets serious about it, then it's like, we'll take it to another level. So,
Right. Now, what are your future goals? What's on the horizon?
So in 2016, I tried to start my own business, Art Without Obstacles, because I do do a lot of like public speaking, and I like working with kids and, trying to encourage them at schools and stuff like that, because if they have something they're passionate about or serious about, making sure they stay focused on that. Um, and they just kind of fan the flames in those areas so they can grow into something, doing something that they love. And so I wanted to start a business to where I could do that, and also sell my art to raise money for different charities and nonprofit organizations around the city of Dallas. So I kind of shelved it. Um, and now I think where I'm at with some of the experiences that I've had over the past few years, I'm looking to revisit it and relaunch it, and that's the goal by the end of the year. So, Art Without Obstacles.
What words would you have for those who, maybe haven't found their God-given purpose, or maybe be pursuing it, but they're running into challenges. They feel like giving up. Maybe they have a lot of obstacles in front of them. What advice, words of wisdom, just from your own experience, would you give to them?
If you're trying to figure out what your talent is or what that thing is that you're good at, a lot of times I think we can overthink that, right? We think it has to be one thing. Because I know earlier on, I was like, well, no, all I know how to do is draw, right? But even with that, at the same time, and I'm going back to when I was in graduate school, I got stuck in one of my classes, and I'm like, um, you know, I don't think I can overcome this hurdle, or I can do this thing. But then also too, I started to realize, and a lot of times, again, it's, discovering what that thing is. It may not be obvious, but as you're progressing through life, a lot of times people have skills that they don't realize are skills, or things that they're developing that they don't realize are developing. And those things may be the things that are second nature, or that you just naturally downplay because you're like, I don't know how I can, use that or leverage that or turn that into something that I do. But even small things like being able to communicate with people, that's a gift. That's a talent everybody doesn't have. And so I think you have to make space and just really sometimes sit down and think about, what am I naturally good at that I may not be aware of? It can be something simple as solving problems. Maybe you're really good at putting puzzles together, but there's some way about the way your gears are turning in your brain that they don't work. It doesn't work the same way as somebody else. And so there's value to that. And so I would encourage anybody who doesn't know just to really sit down and take an inventory and maybe ask the people that they're closest to, or one person that you're really close to, what your natural strengths are. And then when you get that feedback, you can really start to hone those things. If you do have something you're passionate about and you run into roadblocks, The first thing I'd say is don't be afraid to pivot, because even if you have gotten so far with whatever goal you're chasing, you don't feel like you run into a hurdle you don't feel like you can overcome. There's still value in the experience up until that point, and that may give you the knowledge you need to pivot somewhere else. Because even as being a project manager, like I never saw myself doing that. I was just doing 3D art, and then I didn't realize my background and understanding of technology would give me the means and understanding to communicate with people who were programmers. But yeah, I didn't know I was developing the skills that I needed to develop to be able to talk to programmers. And so just being able to understand both worlds, that's kind of how I ended up working as a project manager. And then not only that, again, the whole communication thing, being able to listen, something I learned from my grandma more than I talk, and really listen to try to understand what people's problems are. There's value in those things. And so I learned that, you got to be nimble and be willing to pivot. That experience behind you doesn't go away. You just learn how to use it in different ways. And I think throughout life, as we hit different ages and different times and spaces in life, you will have to pivot to new seasons and new things. And so if there is something you're pursuing, you feel like you're stuck, don't be afraid to pivot if you need to. And then two, um, if you're that adamant about it, there's always more than one way to get to a destination. And so just stay dedicated to solving that problem. And if you can't figure it out, find somebody who knows. And don't be ashamed to ask questions. My artwork is for sale at Pencil and Paper Gallery. So I'll be working with them moving forward. I've been working with them now for probably over a year or so. And so I'm thankful for them and the mentorship that they're providing to me to help me to continue to grow my career as an artist. So all my new works and stuff, they'll be there. And I encourage people to go check them out because Emmanuel and Valerie are two phenomenal people. And they understand Dallas. They understand what it's like being an artist. And I'm thankful because they're trying to continue cultivating an environment where the creatives that are here can come together and start to create a community.